I'm Autumn Lockett.
And this is Mitch Randall.
And you're listening to Good Faith Weekly.
Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. And on this episode, Autumn and I are going to catch up once again, talk a little bit about how COVID is directly affecting us now, talk about the election, the aftermath of the election, and a hope for tomorrow. Later on in the pod, we're going to be interviewing three remarkable students from Baylor University, Emma Fraley, Lexy Bogney, and Veronica Penales. And you will want to stay tuned for that interview. These three students are fighting for equality on their university campus, trying to convince leadership on the university or at the university to accept their LGBTQ plus organization. So stay tuned. Autumn, how are you doing this week?
Well, I am one of the more than half of Americans who is super excited about the election results.
Yes, they came in this last Saturday. It was, it was touch and go there for 3 or 4 days as returns started to come in across the country. Many people really did not know which way it was going to go. And then Saturday, the news agencies started to report that now, President-elect Joe Biden will be the 46th president of the United States, and historically, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will be the next vice president. So celebrations broke out across the country. We had a correspondent in Washington, D.C., Starlett Thomas, was at Ground Zero at Black Lives Matter Square, interviewing folks as they came out on the street. But Autumn, there was one place where a party did not occur, and that was right across the plaza at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah, it was in actually the 51st state of the United States, the state of denial.
Reporting from the state of denial. That's exactly right. President Donald J. Trump is questioning the results of the elections. In fact, at this point, has not conceded, has instructed agencies across the federal government not to work with President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris on the transition. He's acting pretty much like a child, but I don't want to insult children all across the world.
It's really just unbelievable, and I think I'm not at all surprised by his reaction to this, because I mean it's pretty true to the nature. When people tell you who they are, you should probably believe them, and he's been telling us for a while who he is. What I think surprises me the most is how many people that I love and respect and have looked up to, even though we didn't always see eye to eye politically, how many of those people who are behind him,
right, and
really threatening our democracy.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of who you voted for over your time here on this planet, and there's always been a peaceful transition of power. I mean, the closest we've gotten to a real struggle for power, obviously, was more recently, I guess, is the 2000 election when President Bush at the time was candidate Bush running against Vice President Al Gore. And it took over 30 days to declare a winner, but Gore conceded the election. I did not agree with it, but went ahead and conceded. And a transition of power began very quickly after that, from a Clinton administration to a Bush administration. And even 4 years ago, with Hillary Clinton running against President Donald Trump, quickly after the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton conceded to candidate Trump, acknowledging his victory. And once again, President Obama at the time started working with the incoming Trump administration for a smooth transition of power. That's what we do as Americans. We cast our votes. Once those votes are counted, then we accept the results and move forward, whether our candidate won or our candidate lost. And what the current president is doing right now is just really disgraceful. It is an attack against democracy, and those who are enabling him should be ashamed of themselves. With that said, what we are hearing coming out of Washington, D.C., and news organizations are starting to report that behind the scenes, there are long-term federal employees who are reaching out to the Biden or incoming Biden administration to begin to lay the groundwork for the transition. It is over. The president has lost. Biden has won. There's going to be a new administration, and eventually this is going to happen. Even as late as today, our senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford, as well as Senator Marco Rubio from Florida, have said that President-elect Biden needs to start getting the daily briefings. This is ridiculous. And if nothing is done by Friday, the day this pod drops, then they are going to somehow act to make certain he gets those daily briefings, because it is at this point absolutely ridiculous that he is not. And all of this, Autumn, is happening with COVID cases going through the roof.
Yeah. If, I look back in March, whenever we sort of shut the whole world down, and what our numbers looked like then and what our numbers look like now. And it's just absurd to me that life is continuing on. And I know you and I have both been kind of impacted by this. I have, kiddos who are in and out of quarantine, not because they've been exposed directly, but just as our choice as the numbers in their schools ramp up. We just, as early as this morning, decided to cancel all of our extended family holiday plans, which is heartbreaking, and our kids are tearful about not getting to see their grandparents and their cousins, but it's just not worth the risk this year.
Right, absolutely. On Wednesday this week, 142,000 new cases were reported, with 1,470 new deaths. It is really, really shocking that the numbers continue to escalate all across the country. There is a heightened sense of fear, and people are really actually starting to act. In some states, such as Illinois and Iowa and Utah, they're considering mask mandates. I know that some governors have even talked about the possibility of shutting down the states again because of this. Again, mentioning those numbers on Wednesday, this really has hit home for us here in the Randall house, because we found out late Wednesday night that 3 of our extended family members were diagnosed with COVID, and it's just frightening. I mean, you begin to hear about it, you read stories about it, you see news reports about it, but then all of a sudden, when you have a family member who is struck down by this disease, it is frightening. Now, I'm thankful to say that all 3 of those family members are doing well at the time of this taping, but you never know. I mean, it could go sideways pretty quickly, because this sickness is just unpredictable. So we're a little bit worried in the Randall house, but you're absolutely right. I mean, this thing is ramping up again, somewhat out of control. And experts are saying that by Christmas, we could be looking at 200,000 new cases per day. And we're quickly approaching 250 million deaths here in the United States. So people, wear your damn mask. And I cannot emphasize that enough.
And wash your hands.
Wash your hands and wear your mask and act like you care about other people. And because I believe in my heart, Autumn, that most people truly, genuinely do. Now, some people are obstinate, but we are getting to a critical juncture and critical point in this country. It is time to set aside any political statement that you think you're making, any stance that you think you are taking. We are in crisis mode. It is time to understand this is an emergency, and we need to be taking care not only of ourselves, but of one another. It's time that we do this.
Yep.
Well, Autumn, here in just a minute, you and I had the distinct pleasure of sitting down with 3 students from Baylor University earlier in the week. Emma, Lexy, and Veronica are fighting for equality on the campus of Baylor University. For over 10 years now, they've got a student group that has been filing for a charter to be recognized. And this student group is supportive of LGBTQI students. Some of them identify as LGBTQI students, but the university has denied their charter for over 10 years now. And so it was a fascinating conversation. And one of the things I want to say right up front, these three students came across as extremely genuine. They are not bitter. They are not angry. They are fighting for equality, not because they dislike Baylor University. They're fighting for equality because they dearly love their university. And you will want to hear what they have to say. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly, and on this episode, we've got three very special guests with us, all the way from Waco, Texas, at Baylor University. Emma Fraley is a senior at Baylor, studying science research fellows and philosophy. She is the president of Gamma Alpha Upsilon, Baylor's unofficial LGBTQI+ student organization. She is committed to creating diverse, inclusive spaces for all. Lexy Bogney is a senior at Baylor studying corporate communication and is from Houston, Texas. She is the current president of an award-winning Baylor NAACP, an organization dedicated to eliminating discrimination in all aspects. Veronica Penales is a sophomore at Baylor, and she's also a senator in the student government at Baylor. She's a member of the unofficial Gamma Alpha Upsilon, majoring in international studies and political science, and minoring in women and gender studies. Veronica will continue her call to action on Baylor leadership until equality is present on the campus. Lexy, Veronica, Emma, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Well, we are really glad that you are with us today. I've got one question that we've been asking all of our guests during this pandemic, and that is, how is everybody feeling? Emma, are you well? No sickness, no COVID going on?
Well, not COVID, at least. I think I had probably about the nastiest case of flu a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
But I survived.
Good.
I'm back in bed and ever. Unfortunately, it was the same week that we submitted our charter application.
Oh, no.
Which was about as bad of timing as you could have had. So.
I bet. Lexi, you doing okay?
Yeah, for the most part, I'm doing well. Just trying to, make sure I stay on top of things and kind of pull through to the end of the semester.
Sure. And Veronica?
Doing well. A little inside joke we have going on is feeling positive but testing negative. So
that is fantastic. I haven't heard that one. That's great. Well, we wish you all the best in your studies. It's just a weird world for anybody going to school during this pandemic. So glad you're all feeling well.
Thank you.
All right. Well, lots going on in your world these days down at Baylor University. A couple of weeks ago, Baylor University Student Senate passed a resolution, No Crying on Sundays, which is a great name, by the way. We love the name of that resolution. It was passed 35-15, calling on the school to reinterpret its statement on human sexuality and add a non-discrimination clause to its policies for student organizations. At this time of this interview, the school has not yet acted upon that resolution. As a senator in your student government, can you walk us through why this issue is so important for the campus and your fellow students?
I think that question might be for Veronica.
Just a quick correction to that. The bill actually passed 31-15.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so Veronica, if you can walk us through what has happened historically, because I know this isn't the first time the Student Senate has passed a resolution, but this has been going on for quite some time. So can you walk us through and educate us on this issue?
Yes, absolutely. So I was elected as a senator in May, and I got started on this bill right away just because I've known sort of firsthand the kind of reaction that people get when people come out here on campus, such as when I came out my freshman year. I was kind of met with a lot of discriminatory comments on Instagram. Tensions were kind of weird between me and my friends after that moment, and Gamma was there for me as a support group, and I knew that Baylor University didn't recognize them for what they were. So this bill essentially was supposed to be a way for Gamma to get chartered, and in the actual literature of the bill, it's a broad non-discriminatory clause. So it wasn't necessarily just pushing for Gamma to get chartered, but just to have a non-discriminatory clause added to the general process of chartering clubs.
Right. So it's an unofficial club or organization. But Emma, why is it important, not only for you as an individual and LGBTQI community, but why is it important for the university to officially acknowledge your student group?
Right. So
Yeah, that's a great question. Was that for me?
Yeah. Either one.
Sorry. Yeah, that's a great question. So for us, it's kind of twofold, right? So there are the very manifest benefits of being, an official chartered organization on campus, such as being able to advertise and recruit other members, being able to hold events on campus, having access to Baylor's student organization resources. There are a lot of very physical things that we stand to benefit from being chartered. But there's also this much larger and almost more important symbolic aspect, which is, for Baylor to say, these are students that we recognize are on campus. We understand that you are here and you are loved and you are appreciated. And we are happy that you are a part of this campus. Baylor being a private school and, the academic and athletic powerhouse that it is, it brings in students from all over the country and all over the world. And, people come from very different backgrounds and different perspectives. And that is one thing that I believe makes Baylor such an important space to have these diverse conversations with people. So why does Baylor want to not extend that to this group of very, vulnerable yet important students who are also here and stand to benefit from being full Baylor students just like anyone else?
Well said. And Lexy, as president of the Baylor NAACP, what is your involvement in advocating for the recognition of this student organization?
So with my involvement, it's just kind of been a thing of I've seen the way that Baylor Gamma has been treated since I first entered campus in the fall of 2018. The club, since it is not chartered, it's not advertised, and most people don't really know it exists unless you're a part of it. And I remember one day I was entering the sub, which is kind of the place where we go to eat or study, during the day. And they were closing at around, 8 p.m. And I noticed some members of Baylor Gamma kind of setting up in the corner of the sub. And I was wondering, what this organization was. And I had saw one of my friends that I knew, Brittany Laverne, and I had asked her, and I was like, well, what organization is this? And she was like, oh, it's, Baylor Gamma Alpha Upsilon. He said, the unofficial, LGBTQ club. And I was like, well, why aren't you guys meeting in a room? And because they're not a chartered organization, they don't have the same rights, essentially, that my organization, Baylor NAACP, does. We can host events, we can request rooms, we can input information on to connect and, recruit members and things like that. But Baylor Gamma isn't allowed to do that. And so I felt as I came into my position as Baylor NAACP president, supporting their charter is something that we really needed to do because it's something that other organizations haven't done in the past.
Now, obviously, this issue isn't just specifically for Baylor, and I'm certain that you've done research in other universities and colleges. Are there other colleges and universities that are faith-based that have recognized student organizations that are supportive and advocate for LGBTQ people?
So Baylor is obviously part of the Big 12, which is, our athletic conference, very, successful. Also being a part of that, the Power Five. Of those two groups of institutions, Baylor is the only one not to recognize an LGBTQ plus student organization in some form. Obviously, many of those schools may be state institutions or, not faith-based, but there are several which are, including, for example, University of Notre Dame or Texas Christian University. So, that's kind of one way where we can compare Baylor to, some of its peer institutions, at least comparing them, athletically and academically. But even looking at the state of Texas, for example, Trinity University down in San Antonio is Christian affiliated. And what they have done is allowed LGBTQ plus student organizations to form, but they've kind of taken them on in a little bit of a a less official, you could say, stance where the organization is recognized, but they do make a statement saying this organization does not necessarily represent the views of the university as a whole. So instead of coming out and saying, as an institution, we don't accept you here, we don't want you here, they've said, okay, we respect your, right to organize, your right to find support with one another, but, we want to make our position very clear. So we've seen that there are other ways for schools to do this rather than just straight up refusing to let us organize.
So you're saying there are examples out in the country of other universities and colleges that even though they may not approve of LGBTQ individuals, and I hate to use this term lifestyle, but that'd be a term that they would
Sure.
use. There are schools that may not endorse that, again, quote unquote lifestyle, but are accepting of organizations that recognizing there are LGBTQ students on their campus and they want to give them the full rights of a student that are on campus. And Baylor has not done that yet.
Not yet, no.
Okay, so Veronica, I'm going to ask you this. Why has Baylor, in your opinion, rejected Gamma Alpha Epsilon's request to be recognized for 10 years going now?
Yeah, so this was a question I asked myself a lot throughout the months we spent researching what we needed to know for this bill to pass within our own student group. But essentially, it's just having to talk with people who are a little bit afraid to take a risk and bring this issue up to the regents and say, look, these students are sticking their necks out, their reputations out to say, look, we have the student body support. It passed in Senate. What can you do to help us? And those faculty members saying okay, we recognize that this is an issue, but we're too hesitant to take that risk to bring this upon the regents because we don't want to burn the bridge between the regents and us. And it's is that bridge between you guys, does that bridge even exist? If you're not going to use it to take risks, to talk upon issues like this, then what is that bridge doing? So essentially, we've been told time and time again, the battle is with the regents. The regents are the ones who have the ultimate say about whether or not the human sexuality statement gets reinstated. But then you realize, what if it's just the challenges we get faced along with this challenge to get Gamma chartered? It's faculty members are hesitant and they won't take that risk, and that puts more of a challenge on us when it's we're trying to build this unified effort to show the regents, who are supposed to be the final boss in this.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, it's just a lot of people who are too scared to take a risk, I think.
And Lexy, do you see this as when one group's rights are denied, then the possibility of everyone's rights could be denied is a possibility?
Yes, totally. Because I think if, especially just being in a position from a chartered organization standpoint, and there are certain things that, we have tried to accomplish that we can't get through. And I don't want to say it's because of, discrimination, which it might be, but a lot of it has to do with, because what are the regents going to think? And kind of going back to also what are other alumni going to think? And I mean, if we, stay quiet and don't support Gamma and getting their charter, that's just going to prevent, other organizations from being able to be chartered as well. Because another situation that I slightly recall, I believe from my freshman year, I believe it was a Muslim organization that was trying to get chartered on campus. And I just remember going on social media that day, and there were so many alumni, saying that, essentially that this is blasphemous, and that it was, wrong for a Christian school to kind of, support their charter. And it's well, if you can't even support another religion, how are you also going to support, just people in general? And that goes for LGBTQ, and then minorities as well. If we aren't, being non-discriminatory against our students, then how do you expect to feel supported a student on campus.
So the Muslim student organization was granted a charter. They were not, so they were denied one as well.
I believe so. I think they were denied one as well. I just remember a lot of backlash for them trying to even create a space for themselves on campus, even though we're a school that prides itself on supporting students of all backgrounds.
As long as they're Baptist.
Thank you.
I say that as a dunked at the age of 5 in a red carpeted church Baptist. I'm clutching my pearls a little bit.
I mean, you say that as a joke, but in all sincerity, I think that even organizations of other denominations were not allowed until, don't quote me on this, but I think 2003.
Wow.
Yeah, and like today we still have the Secular Student Alliance, Muslim alliances trying to get chartered, trying to at least like have a little bit of Baylor recognition, like saying like we're this is a school of not just Christians, even though we are a Christian university, and it hasn't happened. So
what's frustrating to me about all this, and Autumn's got some other questions, and I'm really a question hog sometimes. What's frustrating to me?
He's a pastor, so we just let him preach. Try to stay out of the way.
What's frustrating to me, and as an alumni of Truett Seminary, which is on the campus of Baylor, is that it seems as though Baylor University has no problem accepting people from other faiths, other perspectives onto the university campus. They have no problems cashing their checks for tuition and room and board. But when it comes to the full rights of a student on campus to be what it means to be a student there at Baylor, then there's a line drawn.
You're getting 3/5 of the experience.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. And it's really frustrating, especially for a university who claims to want to be a tier 1 university, not letting their students be who they are, not let their students meet officially as part of the university is just really, really frustrating. So Autumn, I'm so sorry. I butted in.
It's okay. I mean, Dr. Pepper floats can only cover so much ground, and at some point we need some rights, right? Okay, so Veronica, you co-authored a column for Good Faith Media this week addressing this very matter. You and your co-author, Addison Knight, offered some pretty personal insights into what it's like to be an LGBTQ plus student at Baylor. So can you just tell us a little bit about, for folks who maybe haven't read the article yet, can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, so Baylor prides itself on this little like diversity mission statement that it has, and it essentially says, "Love thy neighbor" are not just words; they're a way of life. And I guess Baylor's way of showing that is me opening my door one morning to a sticky note that says the word FAG on it, over and over for about a week until one of the signs got taken down and I essentially reported it. But that happened this semester. So when I first came out with, again, that Instagram post after running the line with a rainbow face painted on my thigh, a bunch of discriminatory comments were posted on my Instagram, and I reported it to HRC leadership, which for those who don't know is the Honors Residential College where I still live because I have a 2-year contract. Reported it to leadership and was essentially told that something was going to get done about the girls who posted those comments because they had a spot on HRC leadership, and essentially they told me they would get taken off. So I came back this semester to them still on the council, still kind of like living their lives like nothing was done about it. So of course that kind of put me like a little bit at an unease here in a dorm that I'm supposed to be
feeling your own home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people here feel that way because when that stuff happened, a lot of my friends who aren't necessarily out, who are out, like they kind of voice their concerns. They're like, okay, so what do we do now? Like as a community, what are we supposed to do to react to this? Because if we report it and nothing gets done, what does that say to us? Like Baylor, 1, doesn't recognize a support group for us. 2, does that mean they're not even going to protect us if something happens against us? So, yeah, that's my coming out experience here at Baylor. But
wow. So, do you think? I mean, and ask all 3 of you this. I've heard stories like that before, and obviously it's not exclusive to Baylor. Happens on universities, campuses all across the country. Autumn and I happen to live in Norman, Oklahoma, where the University of Oklahoma is. We have had plenty of problems with racism and homophobia and xenophobia. Do you feel like that Baylor is ignoring these instances that you just spoke of, Veronica, Lexy, Emma, that they're trying to look the other way? Why aren't they meeting these issues face on and dealing with them? It seems like they're just being swept under the rug, according to your accounts.
Baylor does have a history of sweeping things under the rug. And I mean, I think that we can look at Baylor historically and see, for example, after the passing of Brown v. Board of Education, Baylor did not integrate fully until 1966, which was when we had our first Black student on campus. That's several years later. Baylor has been very, very slow to change in many aspects, which is not always a bad thing. But it does mean that in the meantime, the lives of students and faculty and staff on campus and people who are affiliated with the university are suffering during the meantime. And I think that Baylor wants to say, oh, we're talking about it. Oh, we're working on it. Oh, we're trying to figure it out. And it's like, well, okay, I can appreciate the want for deliberation and to make, an educated decision. But at the same time, you have to recognize the fact that, that story that Veronica just told, things like that are happening all the time. Mm-hmm. And, we may not know about it every single time, but that doesn't mean that it's not going on. And in the meantime, we can't just keep allowing things like this to happen for the sake of having conversation.
Yeah, and while these conversations are taking place, then discrimination and bigotry continues to occur to students, and students continue to suffer under that bigotry, while all the time leadership is still talking about it. At some point, those words have to turn into action.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Emma, you also wrote an opinion column for us this week, and you talked specifically about finding other LGBTQ plus students on campus. So can you tell some of our listeners who may not have read that a little bit about your article?
Sure, yeah. So my coming out experience was very two parts. I think a lot of people have this similar understanding where you kind of come out first to people that you probably know are going to be a little bit more accepting. And for me, that meant my friends. So when I started coming out on campus, that really allowed me to start talking about a part of my life that I hadn't really been willing to confront for a very long time. So for me, just being able to have these conversations was a huge step forward for me in my personal life. And I think that that's something that everyone wants to do in college. I mean, the whole point of going off to live on your own for the first time in your life is to figure out more about yourself and who you are, a product of your upbringing, but also independent of it. And for me, that meant learning more about my identity. What does that mean for my life in all aspects? And the people that I met at Baylor really allowed me to do that for the first time.
Excellent. Now, we're talking primarily about the rights of LGBTQ plus students on the campus of Baylor University today. But Lexy, you're president of the NAACP there at Baylor. Have you and your peers there at Baylor experienced any type of racism or discrimination while on campus?
I would hate to say that it's almost every day, if not in the form of, just outright racism, a microaggression, or something of that nature. And it's very disappointing. I mean, I remember coming in my freshman year and, upperclassmen telling me stories of kind of, I had a few upperclassmen telling me that there was a few Black students who, after the 2016 election and President Donald Trump was elected, they were getting pushed off the sidewalks, and they just remember being in their dorms at 2 a.m. and just hearing cheering and screaming and yelling and just being in fear of what these next 4 years were going to look like. And then I just, for myself personally, with this past election that just recently happened, it kind of worked out in a way, but I just remember being so terrified in August about what it was going to look like when the election hit. And I just happened to be at home and I was able to, stay in my house with my family and be safe. But I was just so worried for, my friends and then also faculty of color that were going to have to be on campus in the days following and what that was going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, just being on Zoom and, seeing people with Trump 2020 flags in the background of, and during class is kind of nerve wracking. You wonder what that's going to look like. And just even on the level of being a student of color, it also makes me fearful for those who are not only students of color, but those who are LGBTQ plus as well, because you face that level of intersectionality where not only you're being discriminated against because for your color, but you're also being discriminated against in just the way you identify. And so while I have, my own kind of issues with the way, Baylor handles, instances of racism and, homophobia and things like that, it just also, it's very disappointing because from my perspective, it seems like that Baylor is more about pleasing the regents and alumni rather than students that are actively on campus every single day.
Now,
How diverse are the regents? Do you know? I mean, I could guess.
I for the most part, I believe there's one or two regents of color. I remember we had a conversation about it this past summer, because one of the biggest things that that NAACP worked on these past few months was getting Baylor to just even say the phrase Black Lives Matter. We had to write an entire, kind of letter calling them out and pointing out that, you saying those three words would mean a lot. Because we're having a week of events this week through the Black Student Coalition, and there's about 790 Black students on campus. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what the number was. It's like less than 1,000. We make up 5% of the school. And then I have several friends who are students of color and then also to are LGBTQ plus. So again, that level of intersectionality where, people are coming at you, twice or three times as hard, depending on how you identify.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of Board of Regents, and they were mentioned in this conversation, a dissent to your resolution was filed by one of your fellow students, and I found it online. The student mentioned the influence of the Baptist General Convention of Texas. The Texas Baptist Convention comprises 25% of the Board of Regents. Do any of you think that Texas Baptist clergy and leaders are pressuring the university so that they will not change their statement on sexuality?
I mean, my answer to that, I know there was a lot of talk about how we're funded by that convention, this, and that. But my question is, does Baylor really want that influence if they won't be accepting of, their own students, LGBTQ or whatnot? I know they were talking about how Baylor gets huge amounts of funding from the convention, but Baylor also doesn't get a lot of funding because of their discriminatory funding practices. So it's do we even want to be represented or backed by a convention that doesn't support all of its students?
Have the regents reached out? Any of the regents reached out to you to talk to you about your charter, to talk to you about your concerns or issues?
They haven't reached out to me as author of the bill. I don't think they've reached out to Emma.
Historically, have they reached out to any students who are now graduates who were part of this? Because this has been going on. This just didn't happen overnight. This has been going on for 10 years.
Right. I
know that regents.
Yeah, go ahead, Emma.
I know that regents have taken place with conversation regards to this issue, with current students, with alumni, for example. I don't know exactly who initiated those conversations, but I know that they have happened in the past, but no such conversation has happened, at least in my term as president.
Okay.
And I know what I was told when we asked our student body president for an audience with the regents. He essentially said that they are some very hard people to talk to, and talking to alumni who have been fighting in this cause, who were granted that audience, it's like trying to talk to the regents is a battle in itself. So.
Mm-hmm. And what I really appreciate about the tone that all three of you have struck, as well as students that we have talked about or talked to in the past, is that you are not doing this out of any spite towards your university. You truly are doing it because you love Baylor University and you want it to be more inclusive so that more people can have an opportunity to be educated there. And that just speaks volumes to me, that you don't come across as angry. You don't come across, I mean, yeah, there's some disappointment in there, obviously. There's some frustration in there, obviously. But you're doing this in good faith, in goodwill, because you simply love Baylor University and you want anybody who wants to attend there to be able to do so in a safe environment.
Yeah, if I could just say something about that. My personal history with Baylor, so I come from about 2,000 miles away, but Baylor University, I wish that I could find a picture of me in high school because I wore the same Baylor sweatshirt every single day my senior year. I'm pretty sure at that point, my school of 2000, probably every single student knew that I was going to go to Baylor University. It was not even a question. And, for me, that decision was because of Baylor's faith affiliation and being a Christian university and their commitment to, academic rigor. Those were two things that were very, very important to me. And the reason why I bring that up is because one common question that we get, as LGBTQ plus students at the university is people saying, well, if you knew it was going to be that bad, why did you go there? And first of all, there are examples of students for whom choosing a university was not really a choice. For example, maybe it was the only school that offered them the financial incentive to come, or maybe their parents were strongly encouraging them to attend. So let's assume, though, that students have the initiative to make that decision for themselves. I chose Baylor because of its Christian commitment. That was something that was important to me. I didn't come here despite Baylor's Baptist affiliation. I came here because of it. And I don't think that we can just pretend like being gay and being Christian is incompatible, because these are things that are both very important to me personally and to many students on campus. And I don't think that we should be forced to choose one or the other when Baylor has an opportunity to embrace both.
Outstanding. Very, very well said. Absolutely. Well, Emma, Veronica, Lexy, we really appreciate you joining Good Faith Weekly, and we wish you the very best. We hope that this resolution spurs the regents to finally act and accept the charter of your organization. We hope it even goes further and that eventually all LGBTQ plus people will feel safe and welcome and affirmed on the campus of Baylor University. And I say that as an alumni. I dearly hope that for Baylor, and hope it for the church as well. And Good Faith Media, we're certainly committed to making that happen. Well, before we let you go, Autumn's got one last question for each of you.
Yeah, I do. So our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So in light of everything that we've talked about today, let's go Lexy, Emma, Veronica. Give us your more to tell.
I think my more to tell is essentially that, there's always more work to be done, and kind of echoing what Emma mentioned. It kind of struck me when she said, well, if you knew it was going to be that bad, why would you go to a Christian school? Because it's kind of the same sentiment that students of color get. If you knew it was going to be so bad, why did you go to a primarily white institution? And I feel like no matter where you end up, no matter the circumstance, you should be able to feel safe and inclusive in any space. So for me, just always making sure that there's more work to be done, while, passing that bill is a great first step. There's more steps to be taken. And if Gamma's charter is going to open doors for other students to feel safe and comfortable and on campus, and that's something that we're all going to have to keep working towards.
Well said.
So for me, my more to tell is that this is not just a conversation that Baylor is having. This is so much bigger than just Gamma, just Baylor, even just, Christian universities. This is a conversation that Christians in America and around the world are starting to confront, and we're starting to have, these discussions because this is a thing that a lot of people are talking about right now. And just because Baylor is obviously the primary focus of my life doesn't mean that we don't have the possibility to affect other change as well. So I just think that this is a conversation that we will be continuing to have, certainly for the rest of my life, I think. And I'm just very excited to see where that takes me.
And Veronica, you get the last word.
Amazing. So yes, I wrote this bill not with the desire to rewrite Baylor University as a Baptist university, but just for them to recognize that their human sexuality statement is no longer what they're preaching. And it is out of the love that I have for this university that I place a call to action on Baylor leadership to kind of show us the love that they're calling on us to show to our fellow students. Because this university is home for us, and until all of us are able to exist as the people that we are, then is it really?
Amen. Lexy, Veronica, Emma, it has been a pure delight. Thank you so much for joining Good Faith Weekly. We wish you the very best as the semester is coming to an end. Hope your studies go well and your finals are just a breeze, and that Baylor comes to their senses and passes this thing and gets you guys recognized as a student organization. We need to get that done, folks. So thank you for being on Good Faith Weekly.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for tuning in to Good Faith Weekly, and appreciate you sticking with us. And tune in next week as Autumn and I will return. Until then, make certain you're living good faith.